Thank you, Peyton, and thank all of you for being here today. LeVar Burton. Does he need...
Y'all better quit.
Do I need to read this? Let me read this, because if you don't know all the great things, there may be a few here that you'll learn about LeVar. Multi-award-winning actor, director, and education advocate, best known to television audiences around the world for his portrayals of two iconic characters in Roots and Star Trek: The Next Generation. As well as for his 23 years as producer and host of the beloved PBS series Reading Rainbow. Hold up, more. He's co-founder of the award-winning Reading Rainbow digital library, which has produced the #1 educational app and has just introduced Skybrary, the next generation of innovative children's educational media on the web. He's co-executive producer of the upcoming multi-part remake of Roots and has received the Elliott Pearson Award for Excellence in Children's Media from Tufts University, the 2014 Los Angeles Times Book Prize's Innovators Award, and the 2015 Chicago Tribune Young Adult Literary Award. Burton is also the author of the new children's book, The Rhino Who Swallowed a Storm. There it is. Here we go. Hometown, Jesmyn Ward. Jesmyn received her MFA from the University of Michigan and has also received the MacArthur Genius Grant, a Stegner Fellowship, a John and Renee Grisham Writers Residency, the Strauss Living Prize, and the 2022 Library of Congress Prize for American Fiction. She is the historic winner, first woman and first Black American, of 2 National Book Awards. And you know the books Salvage the Bones, Sing, Unburied, Sing. I'm waiting for the chant, 4 more years. 4 more. She's also the author of the novel Where the Line Bleeds and the memoir Men We Reaped, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and won the Chicago Tribune Heartland Prize and the Media for a Just Society Award. She's currently a professor of creative writing at Tulane University. And the big final statement, and she lives in Mississippi. Jesmyn, LeVar.
Good afternoon. It is indeed my extreme and joyous pleasure to be here with the Lil's darling, Jesmyn. I've told people for the last month, I am going to the Mississippi Book Festival to be in conversation with my friend, two-time National Book Award winner, Jesmyn Ward. And as far as I'm concerned, that is her name. Two-time National Book Award winner, Jesmyn Ward. Jesmyn, it is no secret to you, certainly, how big of a fan of yours I am. You are, without question, in my pantheon of writers who are still writing, living authors. And as a storyteller, I want to talk about, if we can begin, talking about storytelling as a healing art for both the writer and the reader. Because I have been healed by your writing. The depth of it, the honesty of it, the humanity in it. And so what I'd like for you to respond to, if you will, is that an intention on your part to heal us and and yourself in the process?
I think so. I mean, I think that there is value in both bearing witness as the writer, right? So writing about the people and the places that you love with honesty, right? And I also think that there is value in healing for the reader, right? When they open the book and when they look at the page and when they see themselves and the realities of their existence and the realities of their lives reflected back to them. Because I think, in part, I think we want to feel seen, and we want to feel a little less alone.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And I think that the kind of literature that I do, that I write, like that's part of its job.
Yes.
Right? Is to provide witness, I think, and connection for the reader.
Right. Amen. And you do, in huge measure. I recently had an experience with Henry Louis Gates, Skip Gates, did my family's genealogy, and I bring that up because I really, really wish my mother had been more forthcoming about her personal story. I couldn't pry Irma Jean's story out of her. And I think that it's because she's from a generation that was just post-slavery. And there was so much shame associated with the day-to-day existence of that generation that the entire generation wants to keep their lives separate and apart from sharing, right? But you are the next generation after, and it seems that, oh, you see what I did there? Totally not planned. But you are in that next cadre of writers where the shame is no longer a dominating force or factor in your writing, It is all about sharing. It's all about revealing. It's all about finding the commonality of experience. And I think it's just remarkable. I'm so glad you are on this planet, Jesmyn Ward. You're currently on book tour.
Yes, I am currently on book tour.
You're on the road, girl.
I am on the road.
How's it going?
It's okay.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm just taking it day by day. I try not to look at the schedule. Like, I try to look at just that day's schedule. Like, what am I doing today?
Right.
Like, that's the only way that I'm making it. Can I say something about what you just said?
This is a
please?
conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess it's remarkable to me what you just said about your mother feeling some sense of shame because, you know, she's part of that generation that is sort of just after, right, slavery. And I guess I hadn't, and the reason that it is remarkable is because I hadn't thought about it before. You know, when I was working on Let Us Descend, one of the things that I did in order to try to, you know, inform myself so I could better write the book was I read slave narratives, right? And for me, I guess as a modern day reader, right, there was some element that was missing, I think. Not in all of them, just in some of them, right? Where it seemed that we were skimming along the surface of that experience. Right. And as a modern day reader, I kept asking, or I kept wondering if there was something deeper than that, right? Like I guess I wanted them to talk about how difficult it was, or you know, I wanted them to talk to give me a clear understanding of the violence of it or the brutality of it. And in a fair amount of the narratives, there isn't any of that, right? You know, there are exceptions, but I felt like most of them there wasn't. And when you said that, it occurred to me, like, that's why, maybe, right? Like, maybe that's the emotion that sort of kept them from being more forthright about that experience, right? Maybe they felt some shame. I mean, all of it was out of their control, right? But I don't know, I'm grateful for that insight because I feel like it speaks to to one of the things that I learned when I was writing Let Us Descend, right? You know, because when I was working on it, it was very difficult for me, and especially in the beginning, to get beyond the fact that she was an enslaved person, right? And that she didn't have much physical agency, right? And that she couldn't drive the story, right? Because in creative writing classrooms, that's all we hear, right? The character has to drive the story. The character has to make the story move and push the story forward. So how do you write about a person who can't do that, right? And so I think it was difficult for me to really sit with her as a person, right? And it was difficult for me to make her real on the page and make her feel a whole range of human emotion and to exhibit a whole range of human behavior. And so, you know, eventually I was able to do it. Yeah. And I think part of the way that I was able to do it was by, like, the first emotion that I understood of hers was the grief.
Yes.
I was like, I understand grief, right? And she, you know, in this situation that she finds herself in, she's feeling a fair amount of grief. And so that was the key for me to understand all the other, emotions that she will have had. And I think that I think that's one of the, lessons that, that I learned in the experience of writing Let Us Descend, that I feel like other writers, in that group that you said in this generation now, who are writing about enslaved people, that I think that they taught to me. Like I read Underground Railroad, Colson Whitehead's Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
He taught me that, like in his work, right? Like that, yes, this story is about an enslaved person, but it's also just about a person, right? And I think that Ta-Nehisi Coates, right, is another writer who taught me that. And he explicitly told me once, he was like, there are millions of enslaved people, so there are millions of stories to tell about enslaved people. And so hopefully I'm finally getting to my point. But I feel like, maybe I had a conversation with Ta-Nehisi, right, about like feeling some trepidation about writing about an enslaved person. I think in part because I see how often, like, stories about enslaved people, there can be some resistance to them.
Backlash.
Right?
Backlash. I don't want to see another slave story,
Right. Right. Which...
Because it's, and I'm absolutely sensitive to the idea of there being trauma associated with reliving those stories. However, in an age when there is a concerted effort to erase our stories, it is really important for us to understand that if we don't tell these stories, no one else will.
Right.
So I love that you have gone there in such an indelible way. Let Us Descend is a master work, in my view, because it has so many of the elements of a master work, including a reference to a previous masterful work, right? I read Dante's Inferno for the first time when I was in the 7th grade. I was not I was not your normal 7th grader, okay? But to grow up and encounter as an adult a novel that I could relate to so much more than Dante, right? As a writer, to read Let Us Descend and to see myself so deeply ingrained in those pages was a real validation for me, right? As a reader, Jesmyn, as a lover of literature, and as a person who knows fully well the value and the impact that literature has had on my life, and then through me on the lives of so many. Look, my mother, and every time I get an opportunity to speak my mother's name in public, I do. Irma Jean Christian. That was my mother's name. I am the man that I am because she was the woman that she was. And in my mother's house, you either read a book or you got hit in the head with one, right? Of course, I'm kidding, sort of. But my mother is really the one, more than any other person, who is responsible for my love of the written word. And when I encounter works of art that remind me of how lucky I am to have had the journey that I've had, to have had the education that I have had, to have had the mother that I have had, and the experiences that I have had, It is so life-affirming. And so I say to you, Jesmyn, thank you. Thank you, because you have given all of us not just a reason to keep reading, you've given us reason to keep breathing. It was very emotional coming into this sanctuary and feeling that love. I got emotional, you got emotional. You want to talk about that a little bit?
It's I'm home.
Yeah.
You know, I walked in and I'm home, and that's one of the reasons I started crying. My my mom and my sisters, I did not know that they were coming, and they came and they were singing for, and that's why I started crying.
I asked her backstage, how's sister? She said, well, she can't come today. That's what you told her. It's good to see you. And your mom? Ma'am, I am a big fan of your work. But I'm not home, and I've had the same response. But y'all made me feel like I was home. This is my first time to Jackson. I've been looking forward to it. And to be here on the weekend of the Mississippi Book Festival and the football game. JSU and Southern, come on, y'all. It's like, Earth is moving today, right? Spirits in the house. I'm serious, very serious. In addition to your work as a writer, you're also a mother. You are a teacher. You wear a lot of hats. How do you find the time to write? And how difficult is structuring your life so that you can get it all done?
Right, which I asked LeVar about backstage, because he is working on a book right now. And, you know, I mean, you are also a much busier than me person. I try to treat writing as, I try to look at it as part of my daily routine, right? Mm-hmm. So in the same way that I get up and, you know, brush my teeth and get dressed and do all those things, like writing is one of those things that is necessary for me to do at least 5 days a week during the work week. And so I try to do it at least 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. During the school year, my kids' school year, that happens at the same time every day. Like the mornings are dedicated. I would dedicate my mornings to writing. When my kids are not in school, that's harder. Yeah. So either I'm waking up before they get up and putting that time in, or either I'm waiting until they fall asleep and then putting that time in. But you know, is a mixture of discipline and flexibility. You just have to figure it out
You just have to figure it out.
as you go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I'm not one of those writers, I don't know if this is true of you, but I've met writers who can write on the road, who travel a lot, right? And they can write while they're traveling. So I do have to admit, I can't do that. I mean, specifically I'm thinking of Nikki Finney. So she is a poet from South Carolina. She won the NBA for poetry the same year I won for Salvage the Bones. And she told me that she wakes up at 3 a.m. every morning when she's on the road. Wow. And she writes, which is so impressive to me, but I can't do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, as one who travels a lot, I need my sleep. I need to be asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning because I got stuff to do when I wake up. Is there anything you can tell us about what you're working on right now?
So I am attempting to write a middle grade / YA book.
Yes. Yes.
And so I say attempting because I'm at the beginning, and I keep rewriting the beginning over and over again. I think I'm scared. I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to do it. I mean, I know I can write, and I know how to write an adult literary novel.
Right.
I can write a memoir.
Yeah.
But I've never done this, and this is scary for me. And I'm afraid of. I just want to get it right. And so I keep rewriting the beginning because I can't. I don't know. I'm having some issues. I'm trying to figure it out.
And you will. You will. But let's talk about the fear.
It's real. I mean, so one of the reasons that this is scary for me is because I'm thinking a lot about audience,
Yes.
right? I'm thinking about
Yes.
my kids. I'm thinking about the kid that I was, my younger self. And I'm trying to, with every sentence, like I'm thinking about that little person reading the sentence, and I'm wondering, is this right? Is this
Appropriate?
Is this appropriate? Am I, I always think about language, right? I'm always thinking about my metaphors and my simile and my imagery, right? But for a particular audience, right, adult audience. And so it's just very different to now have to think about children and wonder if the language that I'm using, if it's going to fit and feel natural to them. So that's my first fear.
Yeah.
I'm also writing in the third person point of view, which I haven't done since my first novel.
Why that decision?
Because
the character called?
Well, no, not the character. I thought back to when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I thought about the books that I loved when I was a kid. And it made me realize that I didn't encounter books written in the first person that resonated with me that I loved until I was older. Until I was in high school. Right?
Okay.
When I fell in love with reading, when I was, a kid at DeLille Elementary School, and reading through my, school library, all the books were in third person, were written in third person. And I guess part of the appeal of third person was I felt like there was something magical about someone telling me a story and constructing a world. And so I'm trying to recreate that magic in this book, and it, I'm nervous about that because I want to do it right, but I don't know.
You will. I cannot imagine you not getting it right because your heart is so much at the center of everything you bring, and And this is an audience that almost more than anything else needs heart.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. You can't get it wrong. I get the fear. I'm scared to death writing this memoir. And I'll tell you why. Because I see that this is an opportunity for me to be absolutely transparent about my life and how my life is played out from my point of view and what the value of that has been to me. And that's scary, being that transparent. Will I still be accepted, right? Once people learn these things about me that I am loath to share. However, I see it as an opportunity. And so I'm hanging in there, right? And determined to do my utmost best to tell the truth in every instance in this book. And truth-telling can be scary because the blowback can be painful, right? And yet, there's really no other pathway, right? So I as a writer who is really living in the midst of fear, I share with you it's gonna be all right. Because I know as a reader of yours that your heart is at the center of your process. And that's the most valuable gift that you give all of us, is a window into your heart. What are you doing for fun these days?
I have a lot of friends who are writers,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that some of my writer friends always, well, sometimes that they tell me is, like, they don't watch TV. Some of them don't own televisions. I love TV, right? I love TV, I love film. Part of the reason that I'm able to continue to do the kind of work that I do, right, is that I am able to escape out of that work and get out of my head by watching TV. And I have, I think my taste is reflective of the fact that I grew up in the 80s and in the 1980s and was a big fan of fantasy in the 1980s, right? Like Never-Ending Story and Labyrinth and all of, Goonies, right?
Yes.
So I still love Willow, right? And so that's the kind of TV and film that I love. So yeah, so I do that. I watch TV and film. Like, I just went to the movies and saw the new Beetlejuice movie. I loved it.
Did you?
I loved it.
Yeah.
The world building,
Yes.
it was so exciting to me, how he was like constructing the afterlife.
Yes.
It was great. It was great. I really liked it. So, yeah. So that, yes, that and I don't know. Like I do. As my writing probably reflects, I love nature. So sometimes if it's just me just sitting outside, I might not be doing anything physical, right? Exercise or anything like that. But, as long as I'm outside in nature, that is also restorative for me.
Absolutely.
What about you?
In that vein, I have been trying to get to a piece of land on an island in Canada for 7 years. This invitation has been extended going back 7 years. A very close friend of mine inherited a large parcel of land on an island in Canada, and has a parcel next door to hers that she wants to sell me. And I finally this summer had an opportunity to get up and see this piece of land, this 30 acres. I've been looking for an exit strategy for a long time. And for the longest time, my exit strategy was going to be Barbados or an island in the Caribbean, because that's when I'm there, when I'm in the Caribbean, and especially on Barbados, I feel like this is how I was meant to live. My diet lines up. It's, you know, fresh fruit and fresh fish and the humidity in the air. And, you know, here in the States, I put on, you know, lip balm 40, 50 times a day. In the Caribbean, maybe once.
You're moisturized.
I'm moisturized. And very unbothered. However, the Caribbean, with global warming and rising sea levels, it didn't feel like a permanent solution to my problem. But this being an island, and this is waterfront property, it's a beachfront property, but the beach is 200 feet below the cliff where the property is. And I've never been in a dynamic like this. I love birds of prey, and there are eagles all over this part of Canada. And on this land that I went to look at, I could see eagles at eye level. And I've never had that experience before. And so when you say just being in nature is restorative, in 3 days on that land, I felt the energy of that land, and I felt it lending its strength to me. And I used to camp a lot when I was a kid. I was a Boy Scout, and it's been a long time since I've actually gone into nature specifically to make contact with that energy. And I have to tell you that I feel like I need much more of that in my life. And we were talking backstage about the changes that I've made in my life post-lockdown, post-pandemic. And one of them is to really find time to be connected in nature more, especially the older I get. I also had the opportunity to realize kind of a long-held dream of mine this summer in going over to London and shooting the first 12 episodes of my new game show, Trivial Pursuit. Because I was very public about wanting the Jeopardy job, right? And I didn't understand when I didn't get it. But what I didn't know was that it really wasn't a competition for the guest celebrity hosts. The executive producer, the man who told me on more than one occasion that his job was to help them find the right person for the job. He didn't want the job. He gave himself, at the end of the day, the job. And then his past caught up with him, and then I was happy to not be in that mix. But I also believe that everything happens for a reason, and that this is this. When I talk to kids, I tell them, take the step that's in front of you, right? The next step will always reveal itself. Life, like walking, is a controlled fall. Jeopardy was the step that got me to the realization, oh, that's not it. It's over here, right? And so the recognition and realization that the universe has got me, even when I don't understand the reason why things work out the way they do. At the age I am, and I'll be 68 on my next birthday in February, I am finally understanding that it's always perfect. It's always perfect. And that if I just get out of the way, it's going to be all right. And that is, and I've always been afraid of writing, and it's probably one of my strongest suits as a storyteller, but it's the one that I have the least confidence in. And so in preparation for writing this memoir, I really had to sit down and have a conversation with myself about my process of writing. And I have discovered a process that has unlocked me, in as much as when I go to write now, I sit down and do my best to get out of the way, right? And just the act of not taking responsibility for what comes through has sort of freed me and given me access to so much that I knew was there but didn't know how to access. And so the act of not feeling like I have to do it has really been a godsend. Getting out of the way and allowing what needs to come through has really brought joy to the writing process, whereas before it was always very painful for me. So I'm grateful for that.
And so how do you do that? When you sit down, do you just tell yourself, what do you say?
I begin with the breath. I sit and I take at least 3 deep breaths and make a conscious intention to surrender my ego in service of that which Spirit wants me to share. And that's working out so far. We'll see if I get to the end, right? So far, so good. I'm really loving the process, and writing a memoir is unlike anything I've ever written before. It is, and it's hard, but it's not as scary, the process, anymore. I think I've found a way in, right? That brings me. That just sort of relieves me of all that pressure to be good, right? And so I'm grateful. I think we're going to take some questions from the audience. Are you ready for that?
Yes.
Yes. Young man with the microphone, he will come to you. Raise your hand. Should you have a question?
I have a question and a shirt for you. It matches mine. LeVar Burton for president, make reading great again. And I'm available to take a photo with you in it afterwards. I'm available for a photo afterwards if you want to do that in matching shirts.
LeVar for president,
Yes.
make reading great again. Wow.
Oh, someone please take a photo of that and send it to me. Matches mine.
Can I tell you something, though? The last thing I want to do in my life is be a politician.
I just think the world could use it. I work in community literacy, and so I get to pick books for kids and get them inspired to read, and it's literally my dream job. And I came back from New Orleans to Mississippi to do that. What book do you each recall kind of being like the book, like, aha, I'm a reader, or this is magic and this is what I want to do? Like, what book is that? And also, I love you too. I've like Instagram messaged you to, when I was at Tulane, I could type in, because I worked there, and I like sent you a message that I'm a fan. I'm not scary, but I've got all your books to get signed. Huge fan.
Is there a question in there? What book? Yes.
Book.
Oh, I have 2,
Okay.
I think. Let's see, actually I have 3. This is always a hard question for me to answer. One of the first was Charlotte's Web. The reason I say that is because my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Carrier, she decided that she would read Charlotte's Web to the class. And so over a course of, I don't know, it was probably a couple of weeks, she would read, a chapter a day. And I remember sitting there and listening to her read on one of these days and thinking, I love this. There was something so magical about sitting there, even as part of a group, but you didn't feel like you were in a group. You felt like, I felt like it was just me and her as she was sort of reading this story and making it sort of come alive. That made me realize again, like, how much I love stories and how much I love reading. And then the next year in 4th grade, I read 2 books. One was The Secret Garden. I just stumbled on it in my library, the school library, and I don't know, there was just something about that book from the very beginning. Maybe because the narrator, when the narrator is talking about Mary, they're like, she's like, this is not a nice little girl, right? She's contrary, she's nasty, and maybe the honesty of that, it just hooked me. And I was like, this book is amazing. So amazing that I was in math class, and I was sitting in the front row. This is how oblivious I was. I was in the front row of math class, and I had the book in my lap under the desk, but the teacher is teaching. Miss Adams was right in front of me teaching, and I'm reading, flipping the pages like this, and she caught me. And she said, Jesmyn, if you can come up here and if you can tell me what that book is about, you won't get in trouble. And I was so mortified and embarrassed and ashamed at being, called up in front of the class. I couldn't say a thing. I was just like, but I still love Miss Adams. I saw her again years later, and it was all good. So that book, and then also, I think Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Also another book that I stumbled upon in my elementary school library, that was just, I think I might be misremembering this, but that book, even if it wasn't written from the first person perspective, it seemed like it was written, like in my memory, that that little girl's voice was so present and so real.
That's how you experienced the story.
Right, that's how I experienced the story.
That's awesome. For me, the book that I was reading when I got what reading was all about was Captain's Courageous, Rudyard Kipling. Not a great book, as it turns out. I've read it since the 3rd grade. I've read it a few years back, and it's not a great book, but what it did for me was I was engaged. Here's the thing. When I finished that book, when I turned the last page and closed the book, I got really sad, profoundly sad. And I didn't understand it was simple depression. I was in the 3rd grade. But it was a depression that was brought on by the longing. I got so immersed in that story and so attached to the characters that I was sad when I had to leave that world. To this day, when I'm reading a particularly good piece of fiction, I slow down. Anybody else slow down, right? The last chapter or so, just to sort of forestall that inevitable sense of loss, right? And sadness. So Rudyard Kipling, Captain's Courageous. I know I didn't give it a great review, but it did. It did have a profound impact on me because it's when the light bulb went on for me that reading it's a mechanism for transportation, right? Reading takes you places, and that's one of the things that I love about my relationship to literature. The places that I can go, and I can sit right at home and travel, right? Wow, good.
Why did you want to be an author?
Wow. For both of us? I'll take it first. Why did I want to be an author? What's your name, young man? Ethan. Ethan, I'm a storyteller. And I'm able to tell stories in a lot of different ways, as an actor, as a director, as a producer, as a podcaster, as a public speaker. As a reader, writers are at the top of the pyramid for me. And I've always been very hesitant to call myself a writer. Like I said earlier, I think it may be one of my strongest suits. My wife tells me that it is, but I don't identify necessarily as a writer. And I want to be a good writer because I have read the works of so many good writers that have really brought value to my life. I want to see if I can give that experience to another reader. Does that make sense to you? No. I should have quit with, I just like to write, huh? Jesmyn, you want to weigh in here?
I'll try. When I first fell in love with reading when I was a little kid, right, and I was reading all those books in my elementary school library, it seemed like the writers were doing magic. There was something, books were magic. It felt like magic. And I wanted to see if I could also do that kind of magic.
Thank you, young man.
Sir, this is more for you, LeVar. Jesmyn, I will say this much. I will be a young 48 in 2 weeks, so I'm slightly 6 months older than you, for starters. But to be honest with you, I graduated from ICC and UNA, North Alabama, back in '98 with a sports broadcast journalism major. And most of the articles that I wrote were sports related concerning basketball, also chorus related concerning anything to do with choral music, anything to do with band. But I also at the time was working at a movie theater and currently at a Coliseum. So I'd give movie reviews on future movies that were coming up because I was taking advantage of the pre-screening for the employees. And also, as a stagehand, I was able to, with the school's permission, I was able to interview Sir Elton John as well as Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. So,
what's the question?
The question I have is what good is a journalist? What's a good relationship for a journalist to a writer? And also, I've actually got a pop from you. Would you be willing to autograph it afterwards?
If I understand you correctly, what's the relationship between a journalist and a writer? Well, a journalist is a writer. There's no question about it. A journalist is a writer. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree, Jesmyn?
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
Hello. My name is Mama Kay, and I have a question for LeVar and also for Jesmyn. So first question is for Jesmyn. Are we going to get a depiction of any of your books in movie or television form?
Yeah. Inquiring minds want to know.
Yes, sir.
I would love for that to happen. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet. I mean, some people have shown interest. A couple of my books have been optioned, many times. None of the projects have gotten beyond that point, because first there's an option, then someone purchases the rights, right? And then they actually they make the film or the television series. We just haven't gotten beyond the option phase. So I hope it happens one day. I would love to see, one of my stories exist in a different form. But I don't know. So let's cross our fingers.
If you had your druthers, which of your novels would you, just off the top of your head, don't give it too much thought, which one would you like to see translated into filmed entertainment?
Okay. I already said I can't. I have problems just picking one, right?
Yeah.
With any, that's like, I can't do that with any question. So I would say, Sing Unburied Sing.
Yes.
And also Let Us Descend.
Yes. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so LeVar, for you, because, I follow you on Twitter and you be cutting up, okay? So I'm just going to pick your brain real quick. So I'm in the state of Alabama. We've been there for almost 3 years, but we're from Sacramento, okay? Yes. And I have found it difficult as a book lover and a reader, the amount of laws that they are putting in place, banning books. They are now trying to introduce in the state of California to make it, I think, a federal crime for librarians to check out books without parent authorization, which means that these librarians can be fined and also thrown in jail. And I am going to be going to the next meeting to raise some hell, but I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, with all of this that's happening, that's centered in the community in which we love and how books are being banned, what are your thoughts on this? Because I haven't really seen much about it. I know you keep it tame, but you still be cutting up on Twitter, so now I want to know. It's an interesting thing. Being alive and being a lover of the written word in this particular now moment in America, I'm not quite sure what to make of it, except to say I do know at a deep and fundamental level that this has nothing to do with protecting children. This is a conversation that we are having in this country about who is going to control the narrative, right? Because where oppression is concerned, controlling the narrative means you are in control of reality. And that's the conversation that we're having in this country. Who is going to be in control of what we see, what we read, whether or not women are in full control of their own bodies. We are having a conversation about who's going to be in control. And I say all the time that if you can read in at least one language, then you are, by my definition, free. And I say that because literacy gives you the opportunity to be a lifelong learner. And if you are a lifelong learner, no one can imprison your mind. I am so sad to have to say that our time here has come to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for my friend, two-time National Book Award